Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent advisory body of the City of Ames City Council. The Planning and Zoning Commission members are volunteers of the community and not part of the city administration. The Planning and Zoning Commission is supported by staff from the city's planning division. The commission is responsible for recommendations on matters involving subdivisions, annexations, master plans, and major site development plans, amendments to the zoning ordinance, and comprehensive plan amendments. We make our recommendations based on city codes, the facts presented, and input from the public. As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments regarding the proposed item. Please direct your input to the commission. If the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask that comments be focused on new information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker information card and present it to the recording secretary. We ask that you come to the microphone to speak so that all comments may be recorded. The order of the proceeding for each item on the agenda will be as follows. City staff will present regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of city staff. The applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once public comment is closed, city and staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss the application based on all presentations and any comments given, and come to a recommendation for city council. The discussion may include further questions of city staff and the applicant for clarification. And with that, we move on to the first item on the agenda, which is the introduction of the commission members.
Cheryl Moss.
Julie Winter.
Mike Clayton.
Mike LaPetra.
Matthew Voss.
Mike Sullivan.
And Jim Blickensdorf.
Have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All against? Movement for the approval of the minutes for November 6, 2024.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. And now we have a public forum. If you would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda, now would be the time to have filled out your card, come to the microphone, and ask or speak on what you wish to speak about. No one? Okay. The next item is the preliminary plat for Sunset Ridge, 12th edition, at 4925 Lincoln Way.
Good evening, council. So tonight we have a preliminary plat that is a little unique in the sense that it's dividing a 29-acre site into one buildable lot and then to multiple lots that are not buildable at this time, but are anticipated to be repositioned for development in the future. And I'll talk about what that entails. So the site is essentially an infill site that's out in West Ames off of Lincoln Way, as you can see here in the hatched area. It has multiple existing roads stubbed to the site historically from other subdivisions. So up here, it's not going to be very clear where West Bend comes in, but West Bend terminates as a dead-end street into this northeast corner of the site. That is where a lot that is proposed to be buildable is proposed, and we'll talk about the termination of that street at that point. Further to the north, you have Westfield, which is right in this area right here, which has a dead-end stub street just past a house on the end of that street. And then you have Durant that is aligned here coming into the site. And then you have just off of the Lincoln Way frontage road here, you have more frontage for a street connection. Now, with this plat, one more. So as you can see, the buildable lot I mentioned here, Lot 1, is at the end of West Bend. And as staff looked at this site with the developer and looking at different concepts for the area, we determined that going into the site with West Bend and also bringing Westfield into the site was really not necessary to meet a transportation goal. And due to the terrain that's there and the natural area that's there, staff didn't believe it was necessary to do street extensions. So the applicant is asking for the preliminary plat to be approved without those street extensions, and also for a waiver of having a cul-de-sac added on to the end of each of those areas. The rationale on the north is the stub doesn't really, if you did a cul-de-sac, doesn't create any more buildable area there. It would take out again more of the natural area, and then the slope of that area would be difficult to accommodate with that cul-de-sac. Now, in that case, there would be one lot that's currently situated on Westfield. It would stay as is, which is on a small stub of a dead-end street. Now, West Bend is a much longer street, and it ends right now without a turnaround at the end of it. It does not have a cul-de-sac at the end. It was stubbed again for a street connection to come through. As a single large lot of natural area, again, the applicant has proposed to not construct a cul-de-sac because of the lack of development potential at the end of the street. However, staff doesn't support just having streets of this length just terminate into nothing as a dead-end street. There needs to be a turnaround option at the end of these. So that's for a street section that is only done with a cul-de-sac unless there is a private easement for a fire turnaround created. And so the pink area you see on this easement, what would happen is if the waiver of the cul-de-sac improvement is approved, they will have to construct a turnaround on their own property. It'll meet fire turnaround specifications. It'll be what's called a hammerhead. So you would come into it and you would have a length of pavement where a truck could back in and turn around and then leave West Bend as a fire truck. It would also be part of the driveway that would eventually be access to a home that is built on Lot 1. The remaining 3 lots that you see, you have this outlot on the north side, and then you have the larger outlot in this area, and then another smaller outlot here. These outlots are to reposition existing properties to, again, be assembled for different purposes. The outlot to the north is intended in the future to be returned with a plat for a small number of single-family lots to be created off of that street. You can see it's a one-sided street that was intended for single-family lots to someday be added, and that is the proposal for that area. The other 2 outlots, as we understand it at this point, they are in the future intended to be merged back together, and a church is looking at acquiring that site for the construction of a church. If that was to occur, the lots need to be replatted again into a buildable lot, and a church requires a special use permit. So there's a site plan review and an evaluation of the operations of the church by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. So this plat doesn't create a right to build a church. It sets up the option for them to acquire the property and then start the development review process for a church. If for some reason that was not to happen, those outlots again are not buildable until they're replatted. If the church did not happen and someone else came in to acquire the sites, then they would have to replat and reconsider how streets and utilities work through the site. And that would still be possible for extensions of Durant and Lincoln Way access to create residential neighborhoods in this area if necessary, but it also allows that option for the church to acquire it and have a single site for a church. The other thing that's important for utilities is that utilities are in place for all of the lots, except for we are asking that with this development, the water main from West Bend is looped back down to Lincoln Way. So our subdivision code looks for looped water mains to create redundancy and safety within the water system. So that's a requirement of this plat that as at the time of development of those outlots, essentially the water main would be extended to complete that loop. So overall, we're recommending approval. We think it meets the subdivision code standards in terms of being able to grant those waivers for the lack of street extensions. The utilities are in place, and then the conservation areas of the natural areas are not to be developed with the way this is shown. But future plats and future special use permits will give much more detail about how lot layouts work, how stormwater would be managed, and then obviously how a siting of a church and its access would work. Any questions for me at this time?
I'm curious, I guess for lot one, essentially the flagpole part of it, is that because of the water main easement, or?
It is not. So by zoning, you have to have frontage on a public street, and it has to be an improved public street. And we don't consider the terminus, the temporary terminus of a right of way to be frontage. So you actually have to be on an actual complete street. So even though they're going to have West Bend as their driveway access, they have to have lot frontage on a finished street, which is Lincoln Way in this case. So if they built a cul-de-sac, then they would not need the flag pole down to Lincoln Way because they'd have a complete improved public street as their frontage. But without that, you need to have a flag lot with frontage down to a street. They could use it as a driveway. My belief is they will not, and they're intending just to use West Bend.
The narrow strip that runs north and south, I assume that's the 5299 Lincoln Way lot. It's noted in here that that was annexed this month into the city of Ames. Now the remainder of this plat, that'll be addressed once not the preliminary, but the follow-up plats for development. That would be addressed at that time then to bring those lots into the city.
All the lots are in the city.
Oh, they all are now? Okay.
Yep. So there was a large annexation this fall that brought in these parcels, and then they were connected to parcels up north on Ontario Street. Those were brought in as 100% voluntary annexation.
Oh, okay.
And I did provide you an email that we did receive from a neighbor to the south on the south side of Lincoln Way that had some concerns about the natural areas here and the development impacts that could occur in the future with the plat.
Any other questions?
Just curious about one thing. All of the lots to the west of this area have a bunch of water retention areas. What would be the plan in this area?
So we do have a mandatory stormwater management code called Chapter 5B of the Municipal Code. The intent is to use that pond in some fashion. We do not have the plan designed yet to manage the runoff. So you have to do both a quantity of management and then also stormwater quality management on site for the development of both the single family homes and a church, if that's what occurs.
Okay. The water feature is not natural, is it?
I do not believe so, but I couldn't say that for sure.
Okay. Looking at the aerials, it looked like the northeast side looked like a dike. And then there's a stream that runs away and it goes away from it. So for the outflow. So I
Yeah,
assume
it outflows to the northeast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Would the applicant like to make a statement? Nope. Okay. Members of the audience, is there anyone who would like to make a statement?
Oh.
My name is Norman Hawkins. I live at 5115 Todd Drive. I've been there since 1984. And the first thing I want to say is I want to thank you all. I know this is a lot of work. You invest a lot of your own time into this, and your efforts are greatly appreciated. My wife and I, we welcome the church. We think that would be a good use for this property, and we can see benefits for us personally from having that facility across the road. Our concern has to do with the traffic. Ever since they opened the two roads to the west, Wilder, and I don't remember which one is immediately east of Wilder, whenever it gets slick, there are a number of accidents that happen at that intersection. And our concern is maybe avoiding putting a road entrance in off Lincoln Way if we could. Did I understand correctly that the church will be accessing off of West Bend? Is that what you were saying?
No. There'll be no access to anything but one single family home off of West Bend.
Okay. So we would like to encourage finding another place for them to enter. My humble uneducated opinion is off of the frontage road, which is at the southeast corner of that property. I know nothing about expenses, other complications, but to me, having the people that want to go to that church, turning onto the edge of the frontage road and then entering into the property would make a lot of sense. Might facilitate or require having a light at that intersection, because it'll get really busy at times. But that is my humble opinion. Thank you for your efforts.
Hello, council members. My name is Aaron Nakama. I live at 5125 Tabor Drive. I did have a question on at least one thing here. You mentioned a lot of ends of streets, but is the intent to have an entrance to this lot from Durant?
So generally, it's comments to the commission. We don't have back and forth.
Fair enough.
I guess the applicant's not here, so I guess I'll add a little bit. So in preliminary conversations, all of the access for the church has not been decided. There's a traffic assessment that will go into that if they make an application. May or may not have a driveway to Lincoln Way. Will likely use the frontage road for some version of access, and exactly how Durant works is yet to be determined based on whether there's an access point to Lincoln Way or not.
Thank you for that. I echo the previous person's comments. Because I live in the neighborhood there, I would prefer the frontage road. Selfish comment. The other thing I wonder is, with it being a church and having a large parking lot, are there city codes or ordinances as to how late lights, security lights, parking lights are on at night?
I do not know that.
I just was wondering how that would affect my evenings, that's all. Thank you.
I'm Shelley Hawkins. My husband's Norm. I guess we talked a lot about this, but he didn't talk about some of the things I'm concerned about, so here I am. Okay, it's we've studied the report, we've listened to the gentleman, and I'm still a bit confused. I think a couple things that I want to know, because our home is directly across the road. We're one of the 200 feet people. So as the gentleman just spoke, the lighting is a concern. Okay, I'm guessing the lighting won't go off at night because every place has security lights. So I'm guessing there'll be, whether it's the parking lot lights or what. So not really fond of that total idea. Then as he talked and we read in the report, you talked about, maybe, and I misunderstood this. I thought it was going to require 3 outlets out of the property for the church. Am I wrong on that, sir? Or whoever wants to answer that?
There has been no approved lot plan for the church.
Okay, so then why, all right, so I read that several times. It's in there, so I'm just repeating what I saw. Okay, that's my next question. Of all that lot area and property, where is the church versus the parking lots? Do we know that?
No. No, that would be a development plat that would be presented for approval. Right
that-
now, all we have is the vacant land.
All right. And then just the last couple minutes here, and once again, I'm a bit confused, but surely you're not opening up Lincoln Way to turn into that property, correct? Do we know that much?
And I think until they come in with a development plat and present it for approval to the city, we're not sure what their plans are. It's not even definite that there will be a church there at this point.
So then why are the signs up? I got up one morning, walked to that end of my house where I have a screened in beautiful porch we added, and there's the big blue sign saying Hope Church. That's another reason. As you talked and said you're working on just the plot area, this is very interesting because we got the letter to come tonight because we're 200 feet. We're just on the other side of the road. And then I'm very concerned about the people, and now I don't have my map, that butt up. Okay, let me get my directions here. On the west side, their backyards to the red lines are just right there. Now, you're right, they got a developer come up with a plan, but at the same time, between the lighting, the entrances, the location of the church in general will be an issue, and seeing my neighbors here, I mean, it's just a bit, I'm not sure. As my husband talked about, the accidents are incredible as we sit there in our family room and watch the police cars go zooming by. But then also is just the general, if indeed the church builds, and okay, hasn't the church bought the property? I've been told that. Is that correct?
I don't know if that sale is complete. I do know they had another property. that
They did, but
sold,
they
so
turned that
any
back in.
things
We
can
all,
change.
yep, that was out by the
So there's
CCC church.
there's a good
Yep.
example that you don't believe every sign you see.
What did he say?
I said there's a good example of why you don't believe every sign that you see, because they did own a different property and now they're looking at this site. So
Yeah.
I do not believe they own it yet. The plat is to create land that they want to buy. That is the purpose of this plat.
And
So
it
then
is-
why are the church signs there? I guess that's probably what some of us want to know, because,
Well, it would seem that they're looking at the site, but as I said, it's not a definite thing yet. For this evening, we're really just here to look at this preliminary plat as you see it. There is no location for a church or parking lot or lighting or anything under consideration because they haven't presented anything.
so then it's really hard as a homeowner to be in favor and somewhat even against not having a clue. I know it's agricultural land now, you would have to change it to whatever it is to be homes and whatever. And I saw in the report too, that there's one corner already that it sounds like someone is building a single dwelling, but I don't remember where that is. And like I said, I've read the report numerous times. I'm not an expert at this, but I think as a whole, we're just concerned that you can approve, but I'm just really unhappy that, and I know it happens, that the signs are up. So let's face it, the city's talking about that's where the Hope Church is going to be. and we'll wait it out. But then will we get a new letter? Because I'll still be 200 feet from it and
Yes.
have,
Yes.
but then what are our options then? Can we still,
Well,
come and share our concerns?
Yes.
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 And at that point, you will have a plat that will indicate what they intend to do.
And do we have any type of timeline? Nothing yet. So they may not.
It's pretty
dig a
much up to the
hole.
developer.
Pardon?
It's pretty much up to the developer.
And do we know who that is? Just out of curiosity, and maybe you can't say, that's fine. I know the land is owned by Hunziker and Molly Neil Wong. That property, people have been after that property. We've lived there for 40 years, so, we're very aware of what's happening, as we call it, the hood, But, so thank you for your time, and I guess maybe we'll be back, but it's just, I guess I think we were hoping for a little more information, and maybe that's our misunderstanding, so I apologize for that, but thank you.
I think the commission would just encourage you to come back as you have developments in this, because it's very important to hear your input on this. So again, we don't have as much information as I think anyone would like at this point, but don't let this.
People that
Yeah.
live, let's just, one more thing and I'll sit down, but people that live near a Ames High field and whatever, those lights come on and and they're not happy, I know, but they do go off. But when you get a place that's a big parking lot and security, you drive around town, all the churches have, lights on 24 or at least during the night, to protect it. So thanks again for your time.
I just add too, as Mike noted earlier, this is a preliminary plat. And basically, it's just to set up. This kind of the first baby step in the process. As you know, somebody noted, have to be a change in the zoning
Yeah.
for the project, and then they'll be coming back with a more detailed plat, and that's when the developer would be here to explain what they're going to do, where the church would be situated on the lot, or whatever else use they end up using it for.
And I
And
understand.
that'll be a lot more detailed. You want to make sure
And I
you're here
appreciate
then.
that. And I understand all that, but I'm just saying, the signs are very disturbing because it sounds like you're not there yet. So I don't personally believe the sign should be there, but that's the way things go. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Samuel Piccone. I live at 4918 West Bend, just at the end of that road, on the very last house there. Thanks for being here, for explaining stuff. It was very helpful to know that there will be a more detailed version of this coming. I think part of my concern was the lack of it in some ways, not knowing where things were going to go or what was going to, what these plans were going to entail, but it's nice to know there's stuff coming down the road. I don't want to belabor any points, but I did want to mention, or at least bring an environmental concern up about this. Living there, having been there for a few years, I know that it's home to several endangered birds and insects. And I guess I'd like to see, or at least get on the record, that this land is home to a lot of different animals, and I would hate to see this plan move forward without some serious consideration about what we would be losing from an environmental and a sustainability standpoint. So I would hope that is part of the thinking moving forward, and that we don't lose that part of this area. I'm new to it, but it's something that we really value, and yeah, I just hope that gets considered. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to?
I don't have one of them slips of papers, but I got a quick question. I'm a little concerned about the.
Can you state your name?
traffic
Can you state your name and location then?
flow. Okay, my name's Troy Kilzer. I live at 5011 Todd Drive. I'm the third house in on the Todd Drive there. And I'm concerned about the traffic flow on Lincoln Way. So this is a kind of a broad question, but is the city planning on any extension of the 4-lane? Because right at Thackeray and Lincoln Way, it goes from 4-lane to 2-lane, and the people kind of race to get to right at that point. It's a choke point. And I was wondering if they're going to try to do something with that, make it a 4-lane before they do all this changing of the planning and zoning on it, or if that is in the works. Does anyone know that for sure yet?
I do not know of any project being considered to do that, but that's not my area of expertise.
Well, I was thinking it might be worth checking into before you change it from agricultural to any type of additional change. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Scott Feinstein. I live on 204 West Bend Circle. Thank you all. So I guess just two brief things. I think piggybacking on was mentioned about some of the animal species. Just on top of that too, just concern for any types of plant species that might also be on these types of lists that might be out in there in those areas to be brought up as a potential consideration and concern. The other question that I had was just more about the process that this takes going forward. So from here, if you could maybe explain, sort of elaborate a little bit upon kind of what happens from this meeting and then how this is in the context of future meetings going forward.
Maybe we could kind of sum that up in our discussion. We're having a lot of back and forth now, which I know is not official protocol.
Okay.
So I wonder if we could maybe save that for our discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
We can do that. We
Sure.
will address it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to approach? Okay. Do you have any concluding remarks?
I don't. I think I'm going to be answering some questions for you, so let's just get started with those.
Okay.
So I think that I do think well, let me take a step back and kind of talk about what the steps are to get here. I kind of probably went too quickly with that when I introduced it. So for those that are not accustomed to seeing all the development steps, which most people are not, so that's not surprising. So tonight, again, there's about 29 acres of land. There's a prospective buyer. Hope Lutheran Church has an intent to buy the two larger outlots to site a church in the future. The north outlot along Tabor is intended for a handful of single family lots to be platted in the future as well. And then the one lot, lot one, that's on the end of West Bend, that will be a buildable lot for one single family home. So all the plat does is create land that can be sold essentially, because the way they are proposing this, 3 of the 4 lots are unbuildable. So in a normal plat, you're getting buildable lots and you're getting a little bit more information about how the sites are going to be developed, a little bit more about the improvements that go to it. But in this case, since none of those 3 of the 4 are not buildable, that's one reason why you're not seeing as much information about how the land will be used in the future. Now, the church itself has a different path for approval than the single family homes. The single family homes will come in with another plat and show individual lots. They won't show you the houses, but they will show you the lot sizes. And that'll be part of that stormwater management plan that goes with that and other utility connections necessary for those lots. But the church itself, as I mentioned, is a special use. So once the site is purchased and they have assembled it into the configuration that they want to work with for their plan, They will have to come in with very detailed site plans. So they'll show us all of the surface improvements, and it'll also have building elevations. And because it's a special use permit, they have to describe their operations, their intensity of use, a lot of things that go into how the use functions on the site. And as I mentioned in our comments, there will be a traffic access assessment that is required because it's a unique use. It's large. We want to manage the access at Thackeray, and there likely will be an access point off that frontage road. And again, with Durant and whether there's another driveway to Lincoln Way, that is yet to be determined because we have not seen the plan. I don't have a size of a church. I don't have a traffic study. I don't have the things that we will have at the time there's actually a proposal for the building. So the special use permit, it would not come back to this board. It'll go to a separate board called the Zoning Board of Adjustment, and there'll be a new round of notices for those people within 200 feet of the property where the church will be built. So people on West Bend probably won't get notice. They may be a couple that are within 200 feet, but not everybody that probably got a notice tonight would get one. People to the south on Todd Drive would for sure, because the church is going to be on the south end of that property somewhere. Those are the steps before us. There will likely at least one rezoning would occur. The single family homes on Tabor need to be zoned from ag to a residential zone. So there'll at least be that rezoning. The church may or may not be in the ag zone. It kind of depends on which development standards they want to live with. If they stay in the ag zone, there's some different requirements versus rezoning to a residential zone. So there could be multiple hearings left on this site. There'll be at least two more. There could be more than that before any of this is all decided. Does that help explain again what the steps will be if this moves forward as a development site after tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
The environmental concerns that were brought up, I'm curious if our job is in part to consider environmental factors, or if there's any part in the process where that would come into it, given for the example, if there really are endangered animals there.
So
do we have any authority of that?
So there's two parts to that. So when a formal development proposal comes in, we do have a natural resources inventory submitted with the project. So that'll assess the conditions of the woods, the grasses, any known issues with protected species that might be here. They'd have to be observed or be mapped as a habitat for that to show up in the resource. I'm not familiar with any mapped habitat within the city of Ames. That doesn't mean there can be an isolated occurrence of a species, but not likely to be mapped as habitat, but maybe there has been a sighting that's been reported to Fish and Wildlife or to DNR that would be of record there. So whether that is shown or not within the resource inventory, if there truly is an endangered species there, federal law still applies. The developer, the landowners are responsible for ensuring that there's no take of that species as part of this. But again, I don't believe any of this would actually be habitat. The disturbance is yet to be determined if there are any into the woods. I don't have a site plan, so I can't tell you exactly what's proposed. I'm very confident it's not a clear cutting of the woods. That's not what you would see for something like this. There's not something that you would normally see since they're not trying to plat multiple lots in this area. So when the development plan comes in, you will have more information about potential resources on the site.
Just a couple questions, a couple thoughts. Full disclosure, I live on the northwest corner of Sunset Ridge, closer to, I think it's X Drive. And so I drive by this entrance every day on my way home. And I agree with some of the people who've spoken tonight. It's a messy place where a lot of people love to speed through. It's also a pretty quiet place. You have Jack's there, and then you have the Boone County line, probably not even a half a mile past that. And it's very low density, single family homes. And I just would like to understand, how does the city code see a church fitting in with the character of the neighborhood that's there now?
That'll be the process of the special use permit. So the residential zoning districts and the ag zoning district allow for churches across the community. And then it's a case by case review of the site plan to determine if there's buffering, is there light management, is the location of the parking in the right place, is the size of the building appropriate for the space on the site. That's all part of that special use permit process.
And a special use permit's heard by
Zoning,
ZBA, right?
Zoning Board of Adjustment.
Or CBA, sorry.
Yep.
Okay, so I'd just like to say, I don't think that a church fits the character of the neighborhood. And if it every step that it moves forward is, I think, a little dangerous because it's closer and closer to approval. Even if we give a preliminary nod to something we don't even really understand right now, we don't see that again. And I think the concerns that the neighbors have stated are very, very real and should be considered. So when it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion to divide the question and lay aside the preliminary plat of XX and YY until.
It's one plat. It's only one motion. There's only one subdivision on the table.
Can you not divide the question?
You cannot divide the plat. It
And
is
approve
proposed as a
lot
single.
one?
You cannot. It is a plat that's either approved or denied.
I see.
I guess just a general comment. I feel like I've been on this board for enough time now, and I think that we all live in Ames and we hear lots of concerns all the time about potential development with environmental concerns. Obviously, we have subdivision regulations in place. Everybody is going to follow every procedure that's on the books to make sure that we're following all applicable local state laws. I will say that I would just like to comment that it would be great if we could see staff do more on conservation easements and trying to push developers to do a better job to encourage conservation of some of those areas. I think everyone here can probably appreciate that this large lot is developable, it's desirable, and it's probably going to happen at some point. But I think based on some of the comments that we're hearing tonight, a lot of you have environmental concerns, and maybe it's time for staff to consider how we can really help to push conservation easements in those areas, or at least try to put some, encourage developers to develop in such a way that helps to protect some of those areas that we all live near and love. So that's just kind of one comment. I do believe that staff will go forward with all of their processes and do all the required studies, but that's somewhere that maybe we could improve as a city. So, but that regulation is not on the book right now. So,
Actually,
okay.
conservation easements are applied at time of subdivision in certain cases. It kind of depends on which subdivision is and if that's an interest that's been put forward either through. What's a little unique is that there hasn't been a rezoning step. Often there's a set aside process in the rezoning in the master plan of what's open space and what's developable area. In this case, there's nothing stopping someone from dividing an ag zoned lot. So that process hasn't occurred yet. So easements are generally created at the subdivision stage if there is a reason to have a conservation easement.
But in this case, we're talking about a very, very small percentage of this land actually being used for subdivision in terms of single family development.
Yeah,
so
so
if we
I
have
think
a special use permit, how does that fit into a conservation easement consideration?
It could be a condition of that process as well. It could be a determination of compatibility is not just the lights and the noise and the activities. It can be what level of disturbance is permitted on the site. Okay. So I think in this case, because 3 lots are unbuildable and 1 lot's going to have a house, that did not, to staff, that did not trigger an expectation of going through an easement process, since we didn't really know what the development footprint would be yet.
Okay.
I think that's the reason why you didn't see anything along those lines in this evaluation.
Okay. Yeah, my comment then would just be, if and when the process moves forward, it would be great if staff takes that into consideration based on the many comments that we've had already about environmental concerns. So.
Any other comments or questions?
I was just going to make clear, I'm recusing myself from this agenda item for the vote. So.
Okay.
I think I'll just note, I mean, in general, I understand some of the concerns about traffic and things like that. I think all of those concerns can be valid, but ultimately we won't know about how all of that will work until there's a plat and special use permit and things like that. So I think it makes sense to move forward and allow that process to go forth, and then we can see, or the zoning board adjustment will see how it fits in the neighborhood character and things like that as well. So I encourage, when we get to that step in the process, all of those considerations to be taken into account.
I guess to folks out there now too, I would encourage you to stay engaged in this process. If and when this does go forward, just remember that we don't have a lot of information now, but your opinion is heard here. So.
I can't add, I'm sorry, I should have probably added this too, since there was one other question about Lincoln Way. There's no plan to widen Lincoln Way at this time. It's not in the long range transportation plan to be widened.
Well, before we move forward, I just want to thank everybody for showing up. This is one of the better attended meetings we've had, and it's always good to see people out there. Do we have a motion?
I would move to recommend alternative 1. The Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend that the City Council approve the preliminary plat for Sunset Ridge subdivision 12th edition, subject to approval of a waiver to allow access to West Bend Drive without the construction of a cul-de-sac.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
Okay, motion passes.
So at this point in time, just to help the audience know what's going to happen next, the preliminary plat does need to go to the city council to be officially approved before the developer can finalize it and have lots that can be transacted. Right now, December 10th is the planned date for city council review of this plat. And there, just to be clear, there's no notice for the council meeting. So plan for December 10th. Ray Anderson is the planner for the project. He can be contacted if there's any other questions about the project or timing of it.
Okay. And moving on to the next item is a zoning text amendment for newspaper publication requirements.
So for this item, 2 years back, we did some adjustments to our notification process for multiple permits and clarified some different language, added some other references in, like Ames Plan 2040 to different things. And as we've been working through this, we realized that as part of that process, we added a step that we do not need to do as a city under Iowa law for certain things. And that one step is that we as a custom have called things where we want public input, public hearings. That's a defined term under state law. And if you call something a public hearing, then you must publish notice for a decision of that action. So we use that term to describe site plan reviews and a couple of other things that we've talked about. And it triggers a newspaper publication requirement. And to staff, that's probably the least valuable notification process, especially for a site-specific thing like a site plan. So we're asking to delete we're going to change the language to not refer to the input process as a public hearing. And that would then remove the requirement for newspaper publication. We would still keep what we're going to call 2 versions of courtesy notice, which is what we have done for decades, which is to send letters to people and also to put a sign on a site to alert people in the general area that something has happened. Under state law, that's not required, but that's been the custom of Ames to do those two things for those types of applications. And that's what it was until 2 years ago when we switched up the notification process and added in the newspaper publication requirement. So we're asking to remove the newspaper publication requirement and go back to how it was 2 years ago. And then in the attachment, you can see the code sections that'll be amended. You'll notice one of them is about the comprehensive plan. We had that meeting last week on a plan amendment, and you can see that would be adjusted along then with site plans, which you don't see very many of, but from time to time you do see them. I will highlight one other thing, and just for a clarification, in that's a typo there. It should be 291507 zoning map and text amendments. One thing that's always been understood but not stated in the code is that when the city council initiates a rezoning, so like when we rezone the whole city, we do not send a letter to the whole city saying your properties be rezoning. So state law does not require that. That's where the newspaper publication requirement's there. So under notice, you'll see I've added a sentence to be clear that when city council initiates something, then there's no notification requirement. However, if an applicant comes in, they propose to go from ag to FSRL, we'll still do the notification process.
So I can understand if you're doing a full change on your zoning map, you don't want to have to notify the whole city, but I believe we've had cases on this commission that have come in that were city initiated, that were parcel specific. How would we handle that then? Because it's not being brought forth by an applicant, but it still has probably some of that same importance that you would want to publish. But I realize that those are very few cases we've seen recently.
Yeah, it would be rare. I'm not saying that we wouldn't notice people, but I'm just saying that it does get confusing for the public when you say the rules don't apply to the city because it's not stated that it doesn't apply. And even though that is the case. So I was trying to provide clarity to what has been practiced just for when that does come up. If it is a site-specific one, I'd be surprised that we don't have some notice because that would be kind of contrary to our expectations of civic engagement and public outreach.
Okay.
Trying to think what that would have been exactly recently.
Does anybody remember? There was one case for sure that we heard probably in the last 6 months.
It was city-owned property.
No, it was something that was council initiated and they asked staff to bring it forward, and the staff was bringing it forward for some reason related to that. And it was a parcel specific. It's probably very, very little. I have two other comments, just if we're trying to bring it up to Iowa, to be clear with Iowa code. Our code references in a couple places that for when we do have to publish, it says except that at least 7 days notice must be given. And in Iowa code, it's normally the 7 and 20 rule. So I don't know if we want to get not less than 7 days, not more than 20 days.
I mean, that law applies. It's just there to say it's at least 7, because otherwise it's 4 and 20 for other types of actions. So that's why it says the 7, to be clear that it's not the 4.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha.
20 is always the maximum
Okay.
for zoning items. Annexations and other things can be different, but
Okay.
so yeah. So normal public hearing notice is 4 and 20. Zoning items of certain types require a minimum of 7 days.
Okay. So staff doesn't need that in the
Nope.
code to say 7 and
We do
20.
not.
Okay. Second thing was on the proposed text amendment code under city council decisions. This could be my misunderstanding here, but we're talking about city council approving. Oh, this is major site development
Yep.
though. Okay. Yeah, that's accurate then. We're good.
What was the reason for having the newspaper added 2 years ago?
I think To be honest, I believe I did not understand that when the city attorney changed that terminology, it meant we were publishing notice. She added that in. It was at the end of the process, and we discussed, well, this triggers notice requirements. I didn't realize that when we were doing that, we were voluntarily choosing to add a higher burden of notification. And so until we actually had two of these come up recently, we hadn't really thought about it because we haven't had a lot of site plans, and we had the comp plan amendment last week. So it came up and we're like, well, why are we doing this? And the attorney's like, well, we don't have to. That's just how we wrote it 2 years ago.
The word publishing.
Public hearing, when you use that term, it triggers a published notice in a newspaper requirement under Iowa code.
Okay.
So you can take public input outside of a public hearing, but a public hearing is a mandatory process where you must receive public input, and it must be published in the newspaper that event is occurring.
Any other questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Go ahead. You got it up.
Move alternative 1. Recommend city council approve a text amendment to remove public hearing requirements for application approvals that do not require public hearings under the Code of Iowa.
Second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. And the obligatory.
Just to keep you apprised of the text amendment related to Romero House that you saw back in September. We did have a public meeting last night at the library for the residents of the single family overlay. We had about 75 people attend and had a lot of comments and input, and that's going to return to city council next Tuesday for direction on whether to move ahead with that proposal to allow social service providers or to modify it another way or not to proceed at all.
Thank you.
So was there, I'm assuming there was a lot of negative.
I think so. I think you had, I think, 3 people maybe come testify before you. When it went to council in October, there was probably a dozen people that spoke more in the audience, and then council wanted a chance for more people to speak. So yeah, a lot of concerns expressed about different conditions in the neighborhood and how does the process work and what may or may not be the long-term effects of changes to the zoning there.
Do we have a meeting in 2 weeks?
Yes, you will.
Okay.
That's the plan. Oh, and I guess I can tell you that as well. So, which should be the item on your agenda in 2 weeks. City Council had been considering changes to the conservation subdivision ordinance. And this is one of the follow-up items from the AEDC that had asked for the City Council to look at regulations in support of housing development. So we did like text amendments for the 20% flexibility, and some other things have been changed throughout the year. So this one's been under review for a while to change some of the mandatory set-asides around the Ada Hayden watershed for development. So we're going to be proceeding at direction of council to propose a new conservation subdivision ordinance that removes the 25% mandatory set aside and take it to 10%, and then modify some of the other expectations there. So we had some studies with council back in October and had some other information, and they reviewed that and directed staff to proceed. So you're going to see a draft ordinance for that in December. That should be the primary item of discussion.
Move to adjourn?
So moved.
Adjourn.